I'd spent $11,000 on my sister's baby shower. A few days before, she sent a message. It's really just close family. Don't make it awkward by showing up. Before I could process it, another ping from Mom. It's her moment. Be mature. No defense. Just a polite order to step aside. So I did, only in my own way. I reversed the venue payment. Froze the event fund for surprise expenses. The notification came in at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. A simple text message that would unravel years of family dynamics in the span of seconds. It's really just close family. Don't make it awkward by showing up. I stared at my phone screen, reading the words over and over, trying to make sense of them. This was my sister-in-law telling me not to attend the baby shower, the same baby shower I'd spent $11,000 orchestrating down to the last detail. The venue was booked and paid for. The private chef had already confirmed the 5-course menu we planned together on Zoom. Hand-painted table signs sat ready in my garage, matching the exact nursery theme they'd chosen. I'd even hired their favorite photographer, the one whose work they'd been admiring for years. Before I could process the betrayal, another message arrived from Mom. It's her moment. Be mature. That second text hit me like a physical blow. I'd expected my mother to defend me, to say something like, "Of course Alex will be there." Instead, she was telling me to step aside like I was some uninvited guest who'd overstepped boundaries. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was literally the only sibling my brother had, yet somehow I wasn't close family enough. Something shifted in my mind right then. Not anger, anger would come later. This was cold, crystalline clarity. If I wasn't welcome at the celebration, my money wasn't welcome either. I spent the next 2 hours methodically dismantling everything I'd built. Called the venue, explained there was a change in plans, and reversed the payment. Emailed the chef with profuse apologies and ate the deposit fee. Contacted the decorator and halted all work. Then I logged into the event account I'd created specifically for surprise expenses and froze every penny. By 5 p.m., the entire elaborate affair had collapsed like a house of cards. The fallout began at dawn. 19 missed calls greeted me, half from Mom, half from my brother, and several from numbers I didn't recognize. But it was the single message that made my blood run cold. Call me now. We need to talk before you ruin everything. It was signed with my sister-in-law's father's name. I let the phone ring for an hour, watching unfamiliar numbers light up my screen while my coffee grew cold. When I finally answered one of his calls, he didn't bother with pleasantries. Do you have any idea how disappointed I am in you? His voice carried the authority of someone unused to being challenged. You're acting like a child. My daughter is pregnant. This is supposed to be the happiest day of her life, and you're ruining it out of spite. Then came the line that made my stomach drop. You're the only one in this family who earns well. It's your responsibility to help. He said it like it was carved in stone, like my income was some kind of communal family fund that everyone had automatic access to. When I told him plainly that uninvited guests don't pay for parties, his tone sharpened to a razor's edge. You're making my daughter cry. You're humiliating us in front of friends and jeopardizing family relationships for years to come. I hung up without arguing. Within minutes, my phone exploded again, this time with group messages that felt like coordinated attacks. Mom sent a wall of text about rising above for the baby's sake, about how families forgive each other, about my supposed immaturity. My brother texted asking if we could work this out later, if I would just fix the situation for now. That phrase echoed in my head, fix the situation. As if the problem was mine to solve, even though I was the one being excluded. By afternoon, my sister-in-law had joined the chorus. Her message claimed she hadn't meant it the way it sounded, that she was just trying to keep things intimate, women and close female family only. But then she quickly pivoted to asking me to release the payments. For the baby's sake. I didn't reply to any of them. At 4 p.m., there was a knock at my door. My brother stood there looking desperate rather than angry, but that didn't last long. He launched into how I was overreacting, how his wife's text was a misunderstanding, how the event was still happening but everyone was scrambling because I'd pulled the money. You're making her look bad in front of her friends and family, he said, as if that was somehow my concern. I repeated what I told everyone else. If I wasn't family enough to be invited, I wasn't family enough to pay. He stared at me for a long moment before asking something that almost made me laugh out loud. You're not going to take the car over this, right? The car. The one I'd bought for them last year when theirs died. The one titled in my name, with insurance I paid monthly. At that moment, I didn't answer him. But something clicked into place in my mind. This wasn't about one event anymore. This was about years of being their safety net, their problem solver, their personal ATM, while they treated my generosity like an obligation rather than a choice. By the time he left that night, I already knew the baby shower was just the first domino to fall. The next morning, I sat at my desk with a notebook and laptop, documenting every expense I had been covering for them. Seeing it all laid out was almost embarrassing, not because I'd helped, but because I'd let it go on for so long without any boundaries. The car topped the list. I'd purchased it outright when their old one broke down, put it in my name, handled registration and insurance, kept it gassed up whenever I visited. They had free use of a vehicle worth thousands, and I'd never asked for a dime in return. I called the insurance company and removed their names from the policy, effective in 3 days. Then I sent a simple text to my brother, picking up the car Friday at 2 p.m. Next came the utilities. What had started as temporary help during a rough patch had become a permanent arrangement. Internet bill, half their electricity. Both accounts were in my name for easier payment. I canceled them both with a few clicks. Then there was the baby savings account I'd been quietly funding for almost a year. $400 every month, set aside for emergencies once their child arrived. I closed it and transferred every cent back to my own account. By noon, I'd eliminated over $1,000 in monthly support they'd been taking for granted. The calls started immediately. My brother tried 6 times in a row. I let them all ring. When Mom called, she didn't ask questions, just launched into how I'd gone too far, and needed to remember that family comes before money. This isn't about money, I told her. It's about respect. She didn't want to hear it. An hour later, my sister-in-law texted. Gone was any pretense of apology. This time she accused me of being vindictive and punishing an unborn child because your ego was hurt. I didn't dignify it with a response. That evening brought another knock at my door. Her father stood there, but this time he wasn't angry. He looked smugly confident, like a lawyer who'd found the perfect loophole. He handed me a single sheet of paper without saying a word. It was a list. Everything I'd committed to, over the past year, the car, the shower, monthly payments, even nursery furniture I'd agreed to help buy. At the bottom, he'd written a total in bold numbers that made my jaw drop. I'm not asking you to do everything, he said with practiced reasonableness. But you should at least settle what you owe so they're not left struggling right before the baby comes. The audacity was breathtaking. He was treating my voluntary generosity like a legal contract, as if I'd signed promissory notes for their lifestyle. I laughed, not politely, but the kind of bitter laugh you give when something is so absurd it defies belief. Then I closed the door in his face. Within minutes, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Brother, Mom, cousins I barely talked to, all with guilt trips about family unity and manipulation about how I'd be blamed when the baby's arrival wasn't as joyful as it should be. That night, sitting in the quiet of my living room, I realized I'd crossed a line there was no coming back from. This wasn't a fight over one event anymore. This was my declaration that I was no longer their safety net. And judging by their reaction, they'd never imagined this day would come. 2 days later, I went to collect the car. I didn't text or call ahead, just drove to my brother's house expecting a simple key exchange. But when I pulled into the driveway, the car wasn't there. Only his wife's old hatchback sat crooked on the gravel. I could see movement behind the half-closed blinds, but no one answered my knocks. Fine. If they wanted to play games, I had better moves. I called a tow company from my car and gave them the make, model, and license plate. Since the car was titled in my name, they didn't hesitate. We'll find it within 48 hours, the dispatcher promised. They found it in 3. My phone rang that afternoon with my brother's voice tight with panic and rage. The tow truck had shown up at his workplace parking lot in the middle of his shift and hauled the car away while his coworkers watched through the windows. You embarrass me at work, he shouted. Do you have any idea how that makes me look? You should be more concerned with the fact that you tried to keep a car that isn't yours, I replied, and hung up before he could respond. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. That evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I nearly dropped the phone at the voice on the other end, my father, who'd been absent for years. The man who never called on birthdays, never sent texts, never showed up for anything important was suddenly playing family mediator. "Your mother asked me to talk sense into you," he began, then launched into a speech about how, when one person in a family does well, it's their duty to lift everyone else up. I was already rolling my eyes when he dropped the bomb. "They told me you promised to buy them a house next year. You're not backing out of that too, are you?" A house? I had never, not once, promised them that. I hadn't even hinted at such a thing. But apparently, in their version of events, I was already locked into future generosity I'd never agreed to provide. That's when I realized this wasn't just about taking advantage of my current kindness. They'd been planning future ways to keep me on the hook, mapping out my financial obligations like I was their personal endowment fund. The next morning, I made one more call, to the furniture store where I'd put a nursery set on hold. Crib, dresser, rocking chair, all scheduled for delivery next week under my name. I canceled the order and had the deposit refunded. They could figure it out themselves. A few hours later, my brother appeared at my door again. No yelling this time, no pretense of reasonableness, just straight up begging. Not for the baby shower money, not for the furniture. He wanted me to at least keep paying insurance on his wife's old hatchback because they couldn't afford a policy right now. For a moment, I almost gave in. Almost felt bad. Almost said yes. But that, almost, was exactly how I'd ended up here in the first place. Years of almost feeling guilty, almost saying no, almost setting boundaries. That's how they'd kept me paying, fixing, and rescuing without ever questioning whether I should. "No," I told him simply. When he kept asking, I closed the door. It was the first time in years I'd shut him out completely. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally in control of my own life. The silence lasted less than 24 hours. The next morning, our family group text lit up like a Christmas tree. Mom started with her usual guilt tactics. "Alex, enough is enough. You're hurting the whole family. Put this past week behind us and move forward." My brother followed with, "I'm sorry for how things went down with the shower, but don't punish us by taking away things we need to survive." That word, survive, made my blood boil. They weren't surviving some catastrophe. They had jobs, a roof over their heads, food on the table. This wasn't survival. This was them missing the luxury of having me cover all the gaps in their budget. When Mom called that afternoon, she didn't waste time on pleasantries. I needed to show grace by reinstating some support, she said. I was taking things too far by cutting off the car, bills, and everything else. "Do you think it was okay that I was uninvited from the baby shower I was paying for?" I asked. She skirted the question, said it wasn't worth ending the relationship over. But in my mind, the relationship had been ending for a while. This was just the moment I finally admitted it to myself. 2 days later, I went to the tow lot to collect my car. Driving it home and parking it in my own driveway felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that had been on permanent loan. That night, my brother called again, not angry this time, just defeated. He said he'd do anything if I'd just give the car back or help with a few essentials. When I didn't answer, he started listing things like he was negotiating his way down from a life sentence, phone bill, gas money, grocery gift cards. I didn't say yes to any of it. The following weekend, my parents invited me to dinner. I went thinking maybe they'd finally see my side of things. Instead, I walked into an ambush. My brother was there. My sister-in-law was there. Even her father was there. The conversation started polite but shifted quickly. Mom talked about how she'd raised me to always take care of family. Dad said money wasn't meant to be hoarded. My brother claimed this wasn't just about him anymore, it was about setting an example for the baby. I realized then that they weren't interested in fixing our relationship. They were interested in fixing their access to my wallet. So I stood up, told them they'd have to figure out life without me, and walked out. No long speeches, no dramatic goodbyes. Just done. That night, I blocked my brother's number. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't experienced around my family in a long time, peace. Walking away didn't mean everything went quiet overnight. The first few weeks were loud with constant calls from unknown numbers, voicemails that started with soft concern and ended with guilt trips, text messages that felt like they'd been written by committee to try different emotional angles. I ignored all of it. Then came the letters, handwritten envelopes slipped into my mailbox with urgent scribbled across the front. Some from Mom, some from my brother, one even from my sister-in-law. I never opened them. They went straight into a drawer. I figured if I ever doubted my decision, I could read one and remind myself why I'd made it. It took about a month for the noise to die down. When it did, the silence was almost unsettling. Over time, updates about my brother's life came through sideways channels, cousins, friends of friends, the family rumor mill. The fallout hit them harder than I'd expected. Without my car, my utility payments, my monthly cash infusions, they had to make real changes. He sold things they couldn't afford to keep, electronics, gaming equipment, a piece of jewelry his wife had inherited, even her old hatchback. I braced myself for news of their downward spiral. But then I heard something that surprised me. He got a second job. Nothing glamorous, weekend warehouse work, but it was steady and he stuck with it. His wife started doing online freelance work, something I'd never seen her attempt before. They moved to a smaller apartment in a cheaper part of town, and for the first time in years, they were paying their bills on time. I didn't learn any of this directly from them. The first real proof I saw was a photo my cousin sent me of my brother holding his newborn daughter, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. No forced grin, no tension around his eyes. He looked lighter somehow, unburdened. It hit me in a strange way. I wasn't there for the birth. I wasn't there for the first steps or first words. But in that picture, I could see what I'd been saying all along. He could stand on his own. He just never had to before. My parents still think I was wrong. Mom says family doesn't turn their back when things get messy. Dad says money isn't meant to be kept in one pair of hands. I don't waste breath explaining anymore. For them, admitting I was right would mean admitting they enabled this pattern for years. The rare times I see my brother now, holidays, random family barbecues, it's civil. We talk about weather, sports, nothing deep. There's no shouting, no awkward apologies, just two people who happen to share blood and history but no longer share obligations. The truth is, I still care about him. Cutting him off didn't erase that. It just shifted my focus to someone I'd been neglecting for years, myself. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that love without boundaries isn't kindness, it's enabling. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is step back and let them figure life out themselves. The irony is perfect. Without my help, my brother is doing better than he ever has. And so am I. 2 months after the baby was born, I'd finally gotten used to the quiet. No constant buzzing phone, no last-minute emergencies to cover, no guilt trips showing up in my mailbox. I was sleeping better, had even taken a weekend trip, something I hadn't done in years because I'd always been saving for whatever crisis they'd throw at me next. Then, out of nowhere, came a knock at my door on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. When I opened it, I froze. My sister-in-law stood there without the baby, without a smile, looking tense and determined. She asked if she could come in. I hesitated but stepped aside. We sat at my kitchen table and she launched right in. No small talk, no pleasantries. She and my brother had been fighting a lot since the baby came. Money was still tight even with his extra job and her freelance work. She admitted uninviting me from the baby shower was stupid and emotional. She even said my brother agreed they'd handled everything badly. Then came the twist I never saw coming. She didn't want money. She didn't want the car back. She wanted me to move in with them temporarily. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. We need help with the baby so I can work more hours, she explained with practiced earnestness. If you lived there for a few months, I could get more clients, your brother could focus on his job, and we could finally get ahead. I stared at her in disbelief. After everything, the uninviting, the guilt trips, her father's list of supposed debts, now she wanted me to give up my space, my peace, my hard-won independence to fix their lives again. No, I said politely but firmly. She pushed back. It wouldn't be like before, she promised. They wouldn't expect money, just my time and energy. She even tried the think of your niece angle. I walked her to the door and told her I hoped things worked out, but I wasn't stepping back into that role. 2 days later, Mom called. Guess who had already given her their version of events? According to them, I'd refused to help even in a non-financial way. Mom tried guilting me into reconsidering. I said no again. That night, I realized something crucial. They hadn't actually changed. They just switched the currency they wanted from me. Instead of my money, now they wanted my time, my energy, my life. And the only reason it didn't work this time was because I was finally ready to say no without feeling guilty about it. Looking back now, I can see the pattern clearly. For years, I'd been their solution to every problem, their answer to every crisis, their safety net for every fall. I thought I was being loving, generous, helpful. What I was actually doing was enabling them to avoid growing up, taking responsibility, or learning to solve their own problems. The baby shower wasn't really about a celebration, it was about control. They wanted my money but not my presence, my generosity but not my voice, my support but not my boundaries. When I finally said no, when I finally chose myself, they scrambled to find new ways to pull me back in. But here's what I know now that I wish I'd understood years ago: saying no to people you love isn't cruel. It's necessary. It's healthy. It's the difference between helping someone and enabling them, between loving them and losing yourself. I spent years afraid that setting boundaries would damage our relationships. What I discovered is that relationships without boundaries aren't really relationships at all, they're transactions. And I was tired of being the one always paying. Today, my brother is more financially responsible than he's ever been. His marriage is stronger because they're facing challenges together instead of expecting me to solve them. Their daughter will grow up seeing parents who work hard for what they have instead of parents who expect handouts from relatives. And me? I'm living my own life for the first time in years. I travel when I want to. I save money for my own dreams instead of other people's crises. I sleep peacefully knowing my phone won't ring with someone else's emergency at 2 a.m. Sometimes love means saying yes. Sometimes it means saying no. And sometimes, it means walking away entirely so everyone involved can learn to stand on their own. I don't regret a single boundary I set. I only regret how long it took me to set them.